Please welcome on stage Bob Bradley and Teddy Moen.
Good. Okay, Bob, good to see you again.
Good to be back.
Yeah, good to be back.
It's colder than last week.
Yeah, so how's France? Is it okay?
Well, everyone knows that the timing of my arrival in France with the terrible situation that happened in Paris last week. So the world we live in these days is complicated. And once again, I found myself looking at a group of players that were asking themselves, what's going on? And so it's not something that you expect, but given everything that we see in the world around us these days, I don't think it's a surprise either.
No. I mean, last Saturday I saw you were doing celebration with the Stabæk community and everything, and already on Monday you were on the flight down to Le Havre to take over as their manager. You don't give yourself much rest or time off?
One day off season, probably not the way you'd choose, but again, all of us in different situations, you assess what you've been doing. When the time comes, for me, Stabæk was a 2-year contract, a 2-year project. It's never easy to leave, but I also felt it was a good time. And then you start to think, where will the next challenge come? A lot gets said about what it's like to be, I don't like when they say American manager, could be Norwegian manager, but a manager that has ambition, a manager that's tried along the way to show people the work and see if anybody notices. My name would pop up in different places at different times, sometimes in England, but for example, in the last 3 or 4 years, with all the times that my name got mentioned in the media in England, there was only one time that a club actually reached out and where I had a chance to interview. Other than that, what you read was just speculation or hype, but none of it was true. And then I've had some different clubs reach out in the last year, and you try to figure out what comes next. And at the end, I thought Le Havre was an interesting challenge. So
it is, because I mean, we all know you left for France now, but I don't think a lot of the people here actually know, why did you decide to go to Le Havre? It is the oldest club in the French game. It is a very historical, famous village, but they're playing in the second league in the French professional setup. I mean, why did you decide to go there?
In every situation, you go, you visit. The first time I was there, I met with the owner. He's American, but that really doesn't mean anything. He had hired a chief operating officer, a young guy who had spent some time at Lorient, thought that he was a bright guy with a good plan. They talked about their project, and then you try to compare it to other opportunities. You ask yourself, do I want to wait? Will it get better? And then ultimately, for me, in all of these different situations along the way, eventually you have to make a decision. I've gotten pretty good at sizing up situations. I can still remember along the way the different moments. Can you imagine traveling from Los Angeles to Cairo and then at a certain point saying, this is an opportunity of a lifetime, but it's chaos. And then I speak to my wife and say, what do you think? She's always supportive, thank God. And so you make decisions by digging down deep and asking yourself tough questions, asking if you're happy where you are, trying to figure out where you're going. And again, for me, different challenges along the way. They show on the board at the beginning. If you could add up quickly, that's 35 years. 35 consecutive years coaching. 15 in the university system, but while I was in the university system, I was coaching youth teams. I was coaching what at that time in the US were called Olympic development teams, sort of the best young talent in the US. I coached some youth national teams. And then when Major League Soccer was starting up, again, if you coach in the university system in the United States, there are many limitations, but you have a secure job. And when the professional league came along, I can remember, again, saying to my wife, we can stay in the university system, we have security, it's a great place to raise kids, or we can try a new challenge. And if we do that, once you go into the professional side, there's no guarantees, but I think we'll always land on our feet, and so off we went. And it's still the same. You take a situation, you think about it. Of course, you have to ask yourself how it fits with your family. Certainly, I never would have gone to Egypt if my kids were younger. By the time my wife and I went to Egypt, the kids were older, my daughters visited, but I wouldn't have taken a young family to Cairo, so you have to size it all up and make your decisions and then roll up your sleeves and get to work.
You do. But I want to rewind a little bit and go back to the early years when you come to terms and actually decided to become a coach manager. What was actually the background of you getting into the game as a coach?
Okay. When I was a kid in the U.S., there was soccer, but it wasn't anywhere near as organized as it is now. And I lived across the street from a school and a field. And all we did every day was go on the field. We played every sport. There were basketball courts. Grew up in a family. My father was a good athlete, and so I had two brothers, and that's what we did. And when I was going to the junior high school, the high school had a good team, so it was sort of before its time. I joked that the high school coach was New Jersey's version of Brian Clough. Okay. You know, pretty incredible. It was the 70s, and he had a young Italian-American teacher who ran training, who got us fit, and Ralph Dugan would come in and give it the team talk, yell at us at halftime. But the high school had a team with tradition, and so at a time when soccer wasn't big in the United States, the first actual team that I ever played on was the high school team. So below that, I played pickup games. I ended up playing in college. I got out of college. I wanted to keep playing. I felt I was still getting better, but the NASL was on the way down. As a player, I joke sometimes that I was a poor man's Gerd Muller, but there's Gerd Muller, and then Jan Agafjortov would say that he was a poor man's Gerd Muller, right? And he was still close to Gerd, but if you keep coming down pretty far, somewhere down there's my version of the poor man's Gerd Muller, all right? But the chances to play weren't great, and my first year out of school, I worked. I still tried to play every day. I had a job that, it gets written about all the time, sales management, Procter & Gamble, couldn't stand it. And I had a chance to go back to graduate school, Ohio University. I was 22 years old. I had a friend who was coaching the team who was in grad school. And he said, I had contacted him, and he said, yeah, I can use help as an assistant. If you get into the graduate school sports administration, you can be my assistant. Great. So I go out to interview for the graduate school, and I'm staying with my buddy, and he said, by the way, I'm leaving. So when you go to speak to the athletic director tomorrow, he's going to talk to you about being the head coach. So somehow at 22, I end up as a head coach of a college team. it was an international university, so I had an Algerian assistant coach. I had some players from Lebanon and Iran and Iraq, interestingly enough. But at 22, I had the chance to take everything that I had thought about as a player. And I was always the player that would, after training, think about whether it was a good training session. I was always the one watching the most football. I was always the one that was talking about games that I had seen from other places. So that was already going. And then at 22, I had a chance to test it all out. And to be 22, think you know a lot, and have a chance to then every day run training sessions, test out ideas. And, you know, one of my most important mentors coming through in the United States is a man from Germany named Manfred Schellscheit. He had played at a good level in Germany, had come to the United States. He took the German, he went through the German system and got his license at the sports school in Cologne at a time when Detmar Kramer and Hennes Weisweiler were the two big people running that course. And Manfred had ideas about how the game was the teacher, and the game keeps you honest. And when I would work with him with youth teams, he would always say, okay, you go, I'm going to have a little game on that side, 5-on-5, and you go and you're going to be, here you call it the superior player. In New Jersey, we called it the neutral player. Some people call it the joker. And he would say, so you go and be the joker in that game. And so I would be in the middle of the field and trying to not show who I was as a player, but try to make the game better, try to coach, this was how he would take a young guy who was still playing and put him on the field. And so my ideas for coaching, and when I was coaching at Ohio, I trained on the field with the team every day. Yeah. I don't think that's by the manual. I think they would say no.
Definitely not by the manual, because you're coming in as 22 years old, taking over anything, and you never attended any coaching courses?
At that point, no.
And you came
I had taken the first year I was out, I took the first U.S. license. So I was in the midst of doing that. But, yeah.
But what was that? If you look back now, what was your idea of being a football coach in those days? Did you have any clue? Do you have any role models or any inspiration or anybody that set you on the right path?
Yeah, well, let me take you backwards one step. So I mentioned my friend Manfred, and I had a chance to play at times for teams that he put together. And I always felt that when you played for Manfred, every time he spoke to you, spoke to the team, it sounded like the game, sounded like football. He said things that connected with what you thought about on the field. I had a college coach who was very much part of the U.S. soccer system. He was seen as a young, up-and-coming coach who had come through the system. And the comparison of the two coaches was important for me early on, because as much as I loved my college coach, training sessions didn't always make sense. Things were out of the book. There were a lot of times you walked off the field scratching your head, wondering what we were doing. Right? And the opposite was true with Manfred. So when I had a chance to start, I was much closer to Manfred. The U.S. coaching course, like all coaching courses, has gone through many changes. But certainly, at that time, it was very theoretical. And it didn't always fit with what you felt it was like as a player. So that was my starting point as a coach, how to take my ideas as a player, how to take the little things that I had started to hear about coaching, fit them in. And then the only other thing that happens for me is especially in the United States, you look around and you have many, many examples of excellent coaches in other sports. So when I was at Princeton as a player, the basketball coach was a guy named Pete Carrill, famous basketball coach, if any of you follow U.S. college basketball. And I would watch his practices, and I would watch the way he ran practice and how he organized things and how he dealt with situations on the court. So I tried to take all that and go to work.
So what you said, in your environment as a young coach, aspiring coach and everything, that wasn't a place to go to meet other coaches, sit down, discuss everything. You have to find, you have to try to find the ideas on your own.
Yes.
So what actually was, what could you get out of watching a basketball coach? What was the things you could see, this gonna work, I'm gonna bring these ideas into the soccer or football practice or my work?
I think when I watched Pete Carrill work, his practices were well organized. He would create situations where he would start the ball in a certain situation and go through a sequence where it was live play, and then oftentimes repeat it so that the same sequence would happen time and time again. It would be game-like, but he would create situations where, as a basketball coach, he was asking players to make decisions. So he was not a basketball coach who was so set in patterns that he still wanted players to be able to make decisions. The decisions were based upon having your head up, recognizing the defense, these kind of things. I thought a lot of that clicked and made sense. And then I would compare all of those things with football that I watched and played. Again, I referred to what was going on in the U.S. Detmar Kramer came to the U.S. And was one of the early important figures in the coaching school. So many of the ideas that were there in the coaching school and for my college coach were from the German idea. And at that time, it was very much man-to-man. It was very much a sweeper and 3 defenders and 3 midfielders and 3 forwards, and then everyone would, you would play against the guy who was opposite you, and you would follow him around. And then I can remember one of my big experiences at that time was in 1984. After I had started coaching a little bit, I had a chance to go to France and watch some games in the European Championships. France had a great team. Obviously the midfield, Platini, Jaurès, Fernandez, and Tigana. Michel Hidalgo was the coach. So you start to read some articles, you start to watch the French team, you start to see things that didn't look, I didn't see Platini always following the same guy around defensively. Right? So I thought, well, wait a minute, why does our attacking midfielder follow the guy all over the field and Platini doesn't, right? So, for me, again, this idea of becoming a coach, what you really do is you immerse yourself in the game. You're studying about, or you're trying to look for examples of leadership. You're trying to see how different coaches operate, but you're also spending a lot of time watching the game, seeing how teams play. Then little by little, I have a chance to get to see some different training sessions. Like many coaches, I had mentioned this to Doug as part of the UEFA license. I was definitely influenced by the AC Milan teams that started with Arrigo Sacchi and then, of course, Fabio Capello. Why? Because this German idea of the individual duel, all right, it's football, it makes sense, but I was coaching at Princeton. We didn't have the best players. The academic standards at Princeton are high. I'll give you a quick aside, then I'm going to get back to Princeton. I can't avoid telling this story because it's one of the great ones at all time. I had a goalkeeper at Princeton. He wasn't a very good goalkeeper. He got in on his own. He won every math and science award in the state of New Jersey. And one day in training, he got hit in the head, and he lifted his head up, and he started going 3.141519. And I said, Jack, what the hell are you doing? And he looked right at me, and he goes, every time I get hit in the head, I recite pi to 50 places to make sure I didn't lose my memory. So at that point, I thought, I need to get a new job. But, you know, at Princeton, we didn't have all the best players. So this individual duel idea meant that if the other team had 10 better players than you, how many individual duels were you going to win on the day? And it didn't always seem like you were going to win enough games that way. And then you start to watch Milan, and all of a sudden it's a different concept. It's more collective. It's not just about one guy. It's moving together. It's, as one guy goes, the next guy is always ready. And so you know, and not that long ago, I read an article where Jurgen Klopp was saying that at that time he was a player at Mainz, and his coach had kind of the same ideas, that, you know, they had played a certain way, and now he's watching this. And so, you know, I think for many of us at that time, watching those teams was interesting. It started to change your view on football. And then, you know, we had college seasons are short, and so now you have this off season. There's many rules, but we didn't follow too many of them because we played football every day. And so one off season, 1993, we changed the whole system. We turned it from this idea that was more related to man to trying to get guys that had never, ever before, and I showed them what it looked like if you're a left back and you're Maldini, and what's it like with Baresi and Costa Curta. And so for me as a coach, to be able to say, you know what, I've been brought up one way, but that makes more sense. And now to, once again, immerse yourself in this idea that every day in training, how can I get these guys to look more like that? And it's an interesting thing, because I still hear from, that team ended up becoming a very good team. Totally made to the semifinals in the college system in the U.S. For a Princeton team to do that, it was a big deal. Almost like Stabæk. All right, but and those players still, that experience that we shared of becoming a team, of becoming, if you want to call it, AC Milan, right? And knowing what that entailed every day in training, and how they got caught up in it, and how that changed. So those kind of experiences go a long way, and you're continuing to try to study the game, but you're also reflecting on your experiences, you're trying things, you're developing your style. You know, I've been to many coaching schools since. I think there's value, for sure, especially when you meet good people and have discussions. But nothing has been more important than those kind of experiences.
So, because going back to the beginning of the 19th, you didn't have access to all the information you have these days, and you actually lived in New Jersey, you know, on the other side of the world, not the center of football. So, as a young coach, you were seeing there is a different concept, there is a vision of how to play this game that's different to what I'm used to. Mm-hmm. How do you go about, you know, to change your ideas? What kind of information were you able to get? How do you get about this? Because one thing is seeing things, but to get the methodology, to actually go back to the training ground and then start working on a new concept. How was that possible? How old were you then?
I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
You know, but there had been, you know, you had gone sort of step by step in this whole thing. And, you know, when I talk about Milan and then those teams, so I'm born in 58. So in 88, when 88, 89, 90. So I've just turned 30, and now I'm introducing some of those ideas. Now again, this team in 93, World Cup in 94. Well, actually, I mean, again, when you talk about experiences, we have this very good team in the fall of 93. AC Milan's Primaveras came to New Jersey. They stayed at Princeton. I watched them train 3 or 4 days in a row. I watched their games.
Of course. Saki was the manager then?
But this was the
Or the younger ones?
yeah, the
Sorry
younger
about
ones.
that, yeah.
Watch them. Then in the spring of 94, while I'm still coaching at Princeton, but I'm involved coaching other teams, in April of that year, I was with my friend Manfred, coach of the United States under-15 youth national team. We went and played in a tournament in France. So I had that experience in April. When I got back, I was home for a few days. I took my Princeton team then to Milan, because when they visited us, we arranged that we could go and visit them. So I was in France for 10 days, got back. I was in Milan for 10 days, I got back. And then did my laundry. And then the Norwegian Federation, because Norway in 1994 trained at Princeton, so the Federation was nice enough to invite my youth team to come to Norway. So my first time in Norway was in May of 1994, before the World Cup. So I had those kind of experiences. So not only was I on the field working on things, but I was having a chance to see how it worked in different places.
But the experience of watching AC Milan and you know, the zone, it was more like, it was the beginning of the zone defense. Was this the beginning of this concept coming more and more into America then?
I think so.
Yeah.
I watched Norway trained at Princeton, but 45 minutes away was where Italy trained. So to be fair, I went way more to watch Italy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell Eagle that,
Oh, no.
Drillo, but anyway, I watched Saki every day. His assistant was Ancelotti. Many of you have seen the Saki videos, and so guess what? He did the exact same thing, and with his full team during the World Cup, they still had many days where they started the training. He put down the flags. He put all the field players, you know, so the second left back would stand behind Maldini, the second center back would stand behind Costa Curta, the other one would, and then they would move to the different colors on the flag, stop, look at their position, look at their distances. So you saw him at work. He did a lot of things that would involve, again, 8 versus 6. Take his block, his back 4, his 2 central midfielders, work in different ways to then create the understanding of what that block of 6 would look like. Then the next day it would be 10 versus 8. So they did a lot of systematic work on their system. They did, you know, they played at times small numbers just for touches and competing. He actually, in the place where they trained during the World Cup, he had them make a field that had boards, like an indoor field. And they would go and play 5-on-5, 6-on-6, then inside where the ball would hit the boards and come back. So it was like the fun part of training for them. It was reactions and shooting and everything. But a lot of his other work was systematic. I tried many of those things, but then at a certain point you say to yourself, are the players enjoying every day going and moving and touching the flags? Probably not. No. So then how can I take some of those ideas and how can I create a training session that has some of those concepts but has more life, has more energy? Because, you know, again, to really, especially with younger players, training, you felt like training needed to be more than just structure. And, you know, I think one of the easiest things to do is to establish this pure structure, But then within the structure, the times that say, how do you react in this situation if it's not quite set up perfectly? Who goes? How do we improvise? How do we, when we have the ball, stretch it out? And then when we lose the ball, how do we pull it back together? So, when you just think about structure, as a coach, anybody who's been to any coaching school can give his team structure. I watched some young Norwegian games, and structure to me looks like literally sometimes 10 wallmen that get put in the ground. There's a back four, and in front of the back four there's some version of 5, and standing up by midfield is 1. And now here's these sticks in the ground because they've been told this is the system or this is the structure. But when it comes time to now leave that and play football, then you feel like they don't do enough. So again, when I first arrived, now I'm fast forwarding quickly, but when I first got to Stabæk, every time a winger would get the ball, the outside back would just stand like he was the wallman. And I would then sometimes say, nah, come on, go and close them down. But it was almost part of the system. The center back didn't want to leave his position, so he always told the outside back next to him, you stay pretty close to me and keep it tight. You can play a back four that way. Certainly I'm not, if you coach a first team and you want to keep your back four in tighter and then give the other team the width and everything else, that might be a decision you make. But if all youth teams play that way, if outside backs from the time they're little don't get pushed out of a comfort zone to know what it feels like to be inside and then have to go outside and physically arrange themselves and close something down and deal with a good dribbler, and then in other moments come back inside and be closer to the center back. If you don't start to challenge the players to come out of a comfort zone and start to push themselves physically and start to understand that the only way you can become a better player is like that, then I don't think you can develop young talent. So again, over the years, you have ideas on what it looks like, but then you have to start to figure out, when I get these players, how are we going to make it work every day?
Yeah, because I also want to fast forward thing, because now you're older, you're more experienced, and you probably come to the part of your coaching career now where your vision of how you want the game to be played is pretty not static, but you got a clear idea how you want things to be. And I think it would be interesting for the audience to know a little bit about what is actually, if you can put it quite easy, what is actually your vision about the game, and then say a little bit about maybe the system of play you prefer, a little bit the attacking side of the game and the defending side.
I can try. It's a hard question.
It is
because it still depends on your team. So I would still think that in every situation, I'm trying to figure out the players. Who are they and what they're all about, trying to get to know them as players.
So if I stop you a little bit there, Bob, you would say, yeah, I got a pretty clear idea of how I want the game to be played, but I can't just say it's going to be like that until I see the material I have. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
I think in every situation I go in and I try to say to the players that I need to get to know you, you need to get to know me. That includes how they think, that includes what kind of people they are, and then that certainly includes on the field how they play. Everything from how good are they with the ball, are they good thinkers, do they read situations, are they slow thinkers, do they have vision, do they play for themselves, do they make other guys better? I mean, these kind of discussions, Jan and I from the beginning every day would come in off the training pitch and we would dig ourselves into these kind of conversations. Here I am a week into a job in Love, and there's a young midfielder, And I asked the coaches, tell me about him. And the only thing they tell me so far is that he had an injury, and so he still plays like he's scared. And so I said, okay, but that's fine. Tell me more. And then they stop, and I say, does he see anything? Does he, when he gets the ball, does he have ideas before he receives it? Does he need 5 touches to make a play? Is his first touch any good? When the ball turns over, does he react, or is he slow? Or, tell me more. Don't tell me he had an injury. I can ask the physio for that. So, I mean, football conversations have to be real. They have to be based on what you see. When you get to know players, your ability to create a good environment for them, challenge them, make them better, involves your picture of them. I still, as I get to know players, young, old, I still have a picture of what that player, especially young ones, what's he going to look like at his best? What kind of player is he? One of the things that we'll still do with young guys at times is try to show him some video, even of a player who plays a little bit like him. I had a funny story when I first got to Stabæk. I said to Morten Torsby one day, do you watch football? He goes, yeah. And you know Morten, he's a tall, skinny kid, right? And I said, what player do you watch that you think, He said, Jack Wilshere. I said, Morten, you're like 190, you're skinny, and you're looking at a bow-legged little guy who's agile and twists and turns and everything else. I said, have you ever watched Sergio Busquets? He goes, no. I said, Barcelona's on tonight. Why don't you watch him? The next day he comes in, he goes, he was unbelievable, right? So I think sometimes, especially with young players, you try to put a hook in them, and then when you're on the training pitch, you're trying to give them a better picture of, listen, in this situation, this is the way to play. So as you're getting to know players, then you're trying to put your arms around all of that and then have a picture, okay, what's our team going to look like, right? How are we going to play? Now, I do have ideas, for sure. When we have the ball, I like that we can play. Can we find the right passes? Off the ball, can we find ways to provide good options? As we pass the ball, do we create chances? When we go forward, are we a team that's going to create chances by just putting in crosses? Can we add to it? So, this picture of the team is constantly being adjusted every day. And then again, defensively, I do believe that you defend as a team. All right, so in some way, what happens when we lose the ball? What's the structure? The structure is some idea. Is it 4-4-2? Is it 4-2-3-1? So what does that look like? But then, once you have the structure in place, now you have to start to challenge the structure. All right, and so, for example, one of the ideas that we would have defensively would be that you can get players to see, the way I say it is to see more than one thing, all right? If I'm now a center back and the striker that I'm playing against starts to move away from me, am I locked into the striker and that's the only thing I can see? Or at a certain point, if he's moving me away and now I see that the midfielder, the interloper or whoever is running through, am I able in that situation to then say, you know what, my priority is no longer the striker, this is more important. So you have to start to create situations that challenge thinking. Again, one of the ways everyone would use at times a superior player in training. That, of course, helps the team that has the ball, but that puts more of a onus of responsibility on then all of the players on the defending team to pay attention to more than one thing, right? Because if they're just locked into one thing, the other team always has one more guy. There's always, so this ability, and so, even now, again, this week, in its simplest way, when we started to work a little bit in Love one day, now they've played at times lately 4-2-3-1. And now, early in training, I stop, and now the right-sided attacker I'm making sure that in that moment, he understands that, for me, he's not just responsible for the left back, okay? That he can see the left back. In some moments in front of him is the left center back. Sometimes inside him would be the left center midfielder. And now is he aware of the idea that now as the game starts playing from his position, he's got to keep track at least of those three things at the same time. Now, we can give him a priority. I can tell him that you still need to make sure that there's some control with the left back. But again, tactically, you then have to decide that if the left back goes forward, is your right winger just following him automatically? Do you ever want to think about pressing? Do you ever want to allow your right-sided attacking player that when the ball's going from one center back to the other to say, you know what, I'm close enough, I can go and press him? So you start to decide with your team. You have structure, but now you start to play with, okay, how are we going to do this? And then, you know, with Stabæk, we would tell our Ernest Asante, I would say Ernest, all right? Sometimes when you think that that ball's coming from the right center back to the left center back, and you think you can really go hard at that left center back and put him under pressure, then you can, in certain moments in the game when we're pressing, that's what you do. And if you do it well, the ball shouldn't just go easily to the left back that you've left, okay? But if it does go to the left back, then you try to make sure that the midfielder who's behind Ernest knows that in that moment, okay, it's my job to then slide out a little bit. And so you start to work on these relationships. You start to, and then again, you decide as you move along as a coach whether or not your team's good enough to make some of those decisions, whether or not you want it to be more earnest. Your job is the left back. That's it. Okay, that's fine. You can do that. So you are still the one that has to decide what's best for your team. But then you start to take all these little things. But still, this is how, for me, you go to work every day with your players. You start trying to figure out, okay, are we going to press? Are we going to wait? Are we going to do both? Where do we pick up? All of this type work, all with the idea that defensively, are we hard to play against? Do we give up goals? Do we give up chances? So, you know, you take all the information and you figure out how to put it into play.
Yeah, because last year at the Cupfinaøeseminaret seminar, you did a practical presentation, of course, and a lot of you, especially people in the area here, might have watched you on TV, because you're very much into the coaching side when you have your team together. Huh? You're not on the touchline giving instruction. You're actually more or less physically on top of every player in every situation, and it seems like you're coaching in the moment, in the situation. And I think maybe that's a bit different to the tradition of a lot of the standard of the coaching over here. Do you have anything to comment to that? Am I right when I say this? Or?
Yes, that's right. But again, let's be clear. There's different ways to coach. So I have had a chance to watch many different people. If I was at Carrington and I watched Sir Alex, he didn't run training. He had good people run training. He decided early in his coaching career, I think he had assistants that say you have enough to do. And he decided that he was a better manager by observing, by letting them run training. Who could argue with that? Sir Alex is one of the best football men I've ever met. Fantastic, right? But I've seen Mourinho and Guardiola work. They're on the field. I mentioned earlier that at some point I was coaching by actually playing, right? And then at a certain point you say, first of all, I'm not good enough to play anymore with these guys. But at that point, I prefer to still coach by being more on the field. It's my way of doing it. I feel that I have an ability on the field to see certain things, but I move around. Some days I'll stand part of the training a little bit more behind the back line on one team, or some days a little more in the middle. Some days I then step a little more to the side, so I vary that. But this is still, for me, the way that I would work. What's also different is that, and in all my work with Jan, he would describe it this way, that if you go by the manual, usually then every day when you put together a training session, you decide what is my emphasis today? What am I working on? I think sometimes in some places it's, are we working on attack? Are we working on defense? And again, everybody has their own way of working. But for me, I think attack and defense go together. I don't see how you can totally work on one without at least paying a little bit of attention to the other. And what I also believe, especially with younger players, is that there would be a package of things that need to be coached every day. Looking around, awareness, reactions, making space for yourself, how you receive a ball, how you pass. So we will oftentimes have a session that has some emphasis, but still in the midst of that, if we're working a little bit defensively on how we would step up in certain situations, and if one guy goes, what is the position of the others? If we're working that way, but the team that has the ball is still careless, giving away bad balls, then I'm also going to coach the ones with the ball. I'm going to still be on top of, stop, come on, better pass. How, what foot do you receive it with? So, again, and how much you stop it, how much you let it go. This gets varied every day. But for sure, for me, attention to the little details like this. And then by doing it more in the center, therefore, I'm on top of things. My energy, my eye sets the tone for training. I think that in most of the situations, I've been fortunate that the players have responded well to this. Still have to go by that. If you're standing on the field and you're coaching that way and they all feel like training's no good, then that's a bad way to work. But, I think I've been able to find a balance, and that includes young players and older players. I've been definitely fortunate in the years that I've coached to work with players like Christos Stoichkov and Yuri Djorkaeff and Abu Treka and Claudio Suarez and big guys. And so, you get tested when you coach those players because obviously they've seen a high level. And so I tried to find a way that made sense for me that also worked with the team.
Yeah, I had a talk with your captain, Morten, a little bit about how he felt your way of doing things at Stabæk were, and especially compared to other coaches he's worked with. And the one thing that really impresses him, and probably a lot of people, is the energy, the enthusiasm, the thing about details, being around, seeing everybody. Is this a trait you feel you were born with, or has it developed? Has it been part of your own development,
I love football. I love trying to make a good training session. I still believe, again, I can think back to youth teams that I coached, and the idea that you could, that those kids would show up and that they would feel like that's different than anything else that I'd been around. So if you coach, I said ODP before. ODP meant the best kids, say, in the state of New Jersey. And that meant they all played on club teams. And then if they showed up and now you had an ODP training session for the under 16s, was I going to bring those? That means that all of those kids are now coming to a training session where, in theory, all the other players there are as good as they are. In their club team, each one of them is the best one in their club team. So now they're coming in, and you're running the training session for those kids, and they now have a chance to play with 15 other kids that are as good as they are and seemingly are as into it as they are. And I would watch some coaches in New Jersey, and they would get those kids together for a training session, and they would stand like it would be like showing them the sake flags, right? What am I going to take 16 really good players that now finally get to play with players as good as them, and now I'm going to pull out my sake book and put them on the field and have them walk around and touch flags, right? I think it would kill them. So then your responsibility in that moment is to say, I need to make a training session that's exciting. I need to make a training session that challenges those 16 kids, because then if I'm a left back, the right back is good enough that if I don't do a good job, he's dribbling by me. The kid I play against every day in training, he can never dribble behind me. So, you have to be able to understand that part. And so, even now, the idea that, whatever it is that we're going to work on, that when they show up, obviously, what day is it? Who are we playing? What's the emphasis? What's the training load? Yeah, all right, I have to manage all these details. But then, at some point in training, on a lot of days, you have the responsibility to give the training session some life, some energy, some personality. And what I've said to the youth coaches, Stabæk has a very good philosophy. I think the youth coaches are very good. But the one reminder that I would make to all of them, and now I throw it out for you, is this: no matter where you learn your coaching, again, I sometimes say there's this manual. All right? And as a coach, it is important to know what's in the manual. But when it's your time to coach, I believe in the idea that you take the manual and you put it on the shelf and you go to work and you let some of your personality and your energy show. All right? I think the players respond to that. I think they like that. And then every now and then, if you need the reference, take the book out again. But I think that's how you work. The other way that I say it a lot is this. Everyone in this room would know that on a certain day, I'm going to coach this exercise. And in the book, it says, here are the coaching points. And then you follow along and you stop it and you say, okay, coaching point 1, when the ball goes here, you do this. But what I think is more important than that is actually coaching the players and coaching the game. It's different than coaching the exercise, right? It's harder, okay? But that's, to me, if I say anything to young coaches, it's just don't be afraid to coach the game. Don't be afraid to let your personality come out a little bit. I still find that players like to be coached. You have to find the right way with each one. What works with one guy may not work with the next one. But players still like to be coached. They like to be challenged. They like to be pushed. The idea that you just, look, my son Michael has played for enough coaches, and I'll tell you what, he's played for plenty. And he'll say to me, he said to me at one point, not only does the guy, I'm not going to give you the team or the name, but he'll say, not only does the guy not say anything in training, he's not even close to the field. He's back so far, he goes, sometimes I'm not even sure he's watching, all right? So again, if your style, if you're a manager and you've got guys that run training and then in certain moments, you give the team talk and everything, if that works and that's your way, again, I'm not criticizing that, but I would think for most in the room, your style has to be a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more where there's actual coaching going on, and then you have to figure out the best way to do it. And I would still encourage, at times, your own personality to come through, and I would still encourage that you coach players and coach the game and not just get stuck on coaching the exercise.
It is. Because your captain also said that compared to a lot of the Norwegian coaches managing had, was very much this energy and the focus on details and being on top of the players a lot of the time in a positive way.
Not always.
Not always, probably not always. But of course you do a lot of the work you do, but you don't do everything on your own. And I'm going to challenge your assistant coach, which is a young, aspiring coach in the game. So Jan, if you take the microphone here and come up here to the podium. I mean, you had the opportunity now to work for 2 years, and I'm going to let him talk Norwegian her. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You're getting that? Du har jo fått muligheten nå til å jobbe sammen med Bob de her 2 sesongene her, og sånn kort oppsummert for å begynne der, hva vil du si om det?
Det har vært helt fantastisk. Jeg var veldig heldig som var i Stabæk på en tid hvor Bob kom inn. Det er ikke 1 eller 2 ting jeg kan si som det og det var avgjørende. Det handler om en stor pakke av ting. Akkurat som jeg har lært mye om å se helheten til spilleren, se helheten i spillet, se hvordan ting henger sammen og hvorfor ting blir som det blir. Så det nå helheten i ting. Mye handler om personen Bob, mennesket han verdiene, typen han hver eneste dag, som veldig mye energi, men det det hver eneste dag. Så ting veldig forutsigbart og stabilt, men det med en veldig høy standard. I forhold til fotballideene hans, så de veldig åpne. Som han sier selv, han prøver å se hvilke spillere han har tilgjengelig. Vi jobbet annerledes i 2014 enn 2015 på noen områder, mens det var en kjerne av ting, the package, som man snakker om, som blir coachet hver eneste dag. Så om fokus litt mer i retning av noen offensive eller defensive ting, så det en pakke av ting som jobbes med på feltet hver eneste dag. Komme seg opp i press, fotarbeid i press, aggressivitet, offensive ting i forhold til å finne rom, første touch, valg, mange sånne ting som blir jobbet med hver eneste dag. Og med den oppfølgingen og det detaljfokuset sett i en helhet, så blir det også en veldig god utvikling på veldig mange av spillerne. Så det handler om fotballideer, det handler om en åpenhet i forhold til spillet, masse erfaring, energi, lederskap, en stor pakke av ting, men veldig hardt arbeid hver eneste dag.
Men når Bob kom, det klart han hadde jo sin bakgrunn og var jo kjent som trener, men kanskje ikke hans måte å se og jobbe med fotball var så kjent. Hvordan var den her overgangen? For det klart at for oss så virker det som at det var litt mer en tilnærming til trening og spille fotball som veldig annerledes enn hva vi kanskje har lært opp til vår egen fotballkultur. Hvordan opplevde du det?
Veldig mye av øktene det rett i spill. Om det 80% eller 90%, det I hvert fall en veldig høy prosent. Men så også treningene bygd veldig opp. Så mange av øktene så også deler av økta dratt ned i tempo for å gi spillerne et bilde av hva vi faktisk ønsker å jobbe med, og hvordan vi kan få det bedre. Så mange av treningene bygges veldig opp, og så økes tempo og intensiteten selvfølgelig, og den blir også variert og styrt ut fra pauser av Bob, og hvordan han leser spillet. Men den måten med å coache ting i spill handler om at han har et veldig klart bilde av hvilke ting som går igjen i spillet i forhold til første touch, i forhold til å komme opp i press, organisering, reorganisering av laget som han snakker om, hvor det handler om en evne til å se helheten, både offensivt og defensivt i en situasjon, samtidig som detaljene blir sett og coachet på en veldig god måte.
Jeg tenker, det virker på meg som Bob har gitt deg veldig mye ansvar da. Du jo fortsatt ganske ung, selv om du har fått kurset på plass og kommet i en posisjon som assistenttrener i Tippeligaen, men det virker som han har gitt deg mye ansvar. Det riktig?
Altså Bob har, i fjor så hadde vi en fotballfitnesstrener som het Tomek, som var veldig dyktig fra Tyskland, som også med Bob i Egypt. Han kjørte oppvarminger også det i styrkerommet, samtidig som han var fotballtrener og også med å jobbe og coache spillere på feltet hver dag. I år så har vi manglet litt den rollen, så Bob har kjørt oppvarmingen i år, for han veldig opptatt av at det blir gjort på en viss måte, og som en viktig del av helheten vi ønsker å utvikle i fotballspilleren. Så har Bob også kjørt alle øktene, og så jeg også engasjert når jeg trener, så jeg rundt og coacher individuelt på spillere, og tilpasser meg å høre på coachingen hans, finner ut om det tilbakemeldinger til hele laget, eller 3-4 spillere, så jeg kan hoppe inn med info til andre. Så det mer at jeg lærte meg å forstå hans ideer, lese hvordan han coachet ting i ulike situasjoner, sånn at vi kunne påvirke flest mulig spillere, oftest mulig.
Vil du si at Bobs inntreden i Stabæk kom til å endre din måte å se og eventuelt tenke metodikk på i trening?
Ja, absolutt. Det som har vært det fantastiske at når det assistenttrener, så jobben din å forstå hovedtrenerens ideer, og hjelpe han, og støtte han, og påvirke sammen med han. Og så det noen ganger da du jobber med trenere som kanskje ikke akkurat har det samme synet på ting som deg, men de jobber sammen, og så utfordrer hverandre, og så utvikler de ting sammen videre. Med Bob så jeg veldig heldig, for hans ideer om spillet var veldig i retning og sammenfallende med hvordan jeg alltid har sett spillet. Men det var bare så mange flere verktøy, så mange andre vinkler å se ting på, som gjorde at ting har gått til et mye høyere nivå. Men jeg var veldig heldig med at det så mange like grunnleggende ideer, og så det selvfølgelig veldig mange flere verktøy i kassa.
Bra. So Bob, when you come to a club and you look at the players, but what about your staff? I mean, what did you see in this young guy? And do you have an idea that part of my job is actually trying to develop him to become a very good coach?
100%.
Yeah.
And so first of all, working with Jan for me was fantastic. Open mind, eager, arrive every day with ideas, knowing that whatever he's going to say, then I'm going to challenge it. So real discussion. The number of times when I watch a game at night, he's still the one who's making the clips and more with the technical part, and I'm sending him text messages. Did you see the play in the 62nd minute of Barcelona against Real Madrid? And then the next day we look at the clip. They become the basis for discussions. They become the basis for, when I say to him, when we do this in training, I have that picture. How do we get that across? So the kind of football experience that we shared for 2 years, running training, talking about training, talking about players, looking at other games, seeing things that we thought made sense, were, for me, very important. And I have no doubt that Jan is going to continue to move along. He's going to be a head coach and do an excellent job. You know, I'm not one to pat up myself on the back because, you know, the way football works is, I told you, it keeps you honest, right? Before my last Tippeliga game, they give me that stinking trophy, something about Coach of the Year, and then Buddha kicks our ass, all right? And then, you know, I go to Le Havre and start working, and in the first match, we lose a cup match to a lower team. So believe me, all right, it keeps you honest in all ways. But the one thing when I say I'm not one to pat myself on the back, the number of guys that played for me and have coached with me who are now head coaches, I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that so many of them maybe took something away. And then, you know, the work that we did together made some sense, and then they had their own motivation and their own drive to take it further. So, you know, for me, you know, when you're a manager, again, it's not just, you know, I talked about making the players better, but then you have your staff. And again, that includes, you know, your team manager, that includes your physios, that includes, so your ability, when you're a leader, your ability to make everybody feel important. And I mentioned Sir Alex before. I'd go to Carrington. He knew everybody's name in the whole building, okay? All these big players, but there was still this down-to-earth feeling inside the club that started with him. So I think the ability then to make everybody feel important And the first day at Stabæk, they introduced me to the equipment man, Alexander Colin Cooper. And I said, okay, from now on, you're Sir Alex here, right? And everybody laughs a little bit, but you know what? It was an early way of saying, guess what? You're important, right? And then to have a way to let him know I appreciate what he does. Yeah, in certain moments saying, I don't think that's the best way to do it. But your ability to make the people that you work with better, to make them feel important, to make them, I told you, the players show up every day, and you want them to feel like, you know what, I like coming here. I like what's going on. I like training. I like the environment. I think it's the same with all the rest. And so this is management. This is leadership. And, you know, if you don't look around, if you don't pay attention to little things, if you don't have the right mix between, you know, making points, but also knowing how to do it in a way where, you know, at times it's light and funny, and you know how to joke. And, you know, in Stabæk, almost every day when we would start at 10 o'clock, I would then go into the locker room, and now I would speak to the players for a few minutes before we were on the field. And some days I would talk about what's coming up. Some days I would talk about, okay, the last game. But many days I would also just say, you know, it's Ernest, come up here. And then Ernest would get up there and he wouldn't have any idea what was going on. And then you'd just say to everybody, you know, today's Ernest's birthday. All right, Ernest, come on, make a speech. All right, and so, you know, your ability to engage your group, make it, I said, have energy and make them feel important, and make sure that this is all leadership. All right, you figure out your own way to do it, but no matter what the situation, if players, people enjoy showing up, enjoy the idea that the work's good and that they're part of it, I think that goes a long way.
Just to add one thing, as you mentioned earlier, that the coaching part and the personality part, which is a big part of what you bring every day with your football ideas, but also how much you actually coach and stop the game throughout the session. Of course, as this session goes on, you often let it go more and more, but also the number of times things are coached, details, and also given ideas that it's different ways to solve a situation. It's just not one way. But the ability to coach different situations, offensive, defensive, with an open mind and different ideas to how to actually do it has also been very interesting. But it demands a coach that sees offensive, defensive, details, the footwork, did he look before he get the ball? You have to see all those little details to be able to coach them at the right level.
Good. Jan, thank you. Bring that with you. Huh? Sit down.
Okay.
We'll try to round up and go a bit back to leadership, because we haven't really digged into the fact that when you came to Stabæk last season, the predictions for the season was that Stabæk were newly promoted, and they were definitely going straight back. There were no question about that. They knew you were an experienced manager, but the press, everybody said, number 16 going back. And you took them, I can't remember the place, but you did a really good season last year, nearly went to the Cup final. And within a few months, you made a really mediocre team, in the opinion of people, into one of the top teams in the game. There has to be a secret formula. There has to be something you have been doing that we haven't seen, maybe some of our own people been doing.
I don't think there's secret formulas.
No?
That's for sure. I think there's good managers and bad managers. I think there's good work and bad work. Good players and bad players, you know. And so I don't follow a script, but I said I do have an idea with a group. When you start, you try to figure out, again, when they show up every day, what's it going to be like? How are we going to speak to each other? What's respect mean? What's trust mean? How are we going to have some fun when we step on the field? What training is going to be about? As a team, who are we? You know, what are we all about when we step on the field? When I started with the U.S., it had slipped a little bit, but we thought, you know what, we were always a team that was hard to play against. We need to make sure that no matter who we play, anywhere in the world, that we're hard to play against. Well, that's a start. Then you build on that. In Stabæk, the first season, again, you have to decide in that situation. Do you want to have a team that, the challenge is, of course, to stay up. So how are you going to go about it? Is it going to be that we're going to be very cautious? We are going to try to make sure we give nothing away, try to take a point when we can, every now and then maybe sneak 3. Or we said no to that one. Or are we going to be a team where we're not going to be afraid to play football? We're going to step on the field. We're going to compete. We're going to try to step up on teams. We're going to try to take 3 points as many times as we can. We chose that. That doesn't make it the right choice, but that's also a way of telling the players, this is how you're going to get better. And we had, in the first 10 games of the season in 2014, our results were better than anybody expected. And then right before the break, we dropped. And then, you know, again, now you're a leader. So what do? When you go through coaching courses, you know, they bring in outside people, and you do the sheets where you fill out, you answer the questions. In this situation, do I do it all of the time, most of the time, some of the time, never? And then at the end, you have this profile of who you are. Okay, great. All right. But then when the time comes and you stand in front, do you know who you are? Do you know how you come across? Do you know what it sounds like? And so for me, I can remember telling the players at that point, I told you before the season that when you come from the second league to the first league, nothing comes for free, right? And so we're no different than we were 2 weeks ago. We're not changing the plan. It's not like we came in and now I've got a whole new idea on playing football. The same things that we set out to achieve, to become better, that's where we are. And our margin is small. We had a bunch of games that went our way, all right? Now a few haven't. That's football, all right? And we're not going backwards, all right? And if you trust, I said to him a few times, trust me. We have a good team. We're going to be fine, all right? Let's keep working. So you decide, how am I going to come across? You know, you can imagine when then you take on challenges like going to Egypt and Port Said happens, and then you stand in front of the players at that point, all right? So your ability to connect, your ability to give a good message, to make them feel like, you know what, we're in this together. I think, you know, that's what leadership is. And, you know, I don't follow any script again, but, you know, I've always felt good. You know, the ability to, I mean, in Egypt, when everything was going crazy, I used to say to the players, you know, in this country where everybody's divided, we're the only example of a group that's together. We're the only example of what it means to be united in anything. We're different, right? And you know what? They believed that, all right? That wasn't just bullshit to them. That meant something. And so, you know, when you speak to a group, you have to come up with ways to say things so that it's real. It can't just be, like I said before, it can't just be out of the book. And that changes in different moments, but you know, that's what leadership is. The higher the level you go, the more the pressure, okay? If you lose track, I've been around Jose Mourinho a little bit. He's an incredibly clever guy, all right? He's smart, he's a great, you know, you see his trainings, he's fantastic, right? But I'm not a close friend, but if I were a close friend, and then he got to the third season at Real Madrid, I think I would have said to him, listen, it's not about you, right? You've lost, you lost track of that part. It's Real Madrid, right? As big as you are, Real Madrid's bigger, right? And your ability at that moment, that it's not about your ego and you, and so even the best can lose their way. Even the best can all of a sudden, with the way the press works. And again, what happens at a club like Real Madrid, yes, it's totally different than if you work in Norway. 5 or 6 of the players have their own writers who write exactly what they want. So it's all of a sudden, the higher the level, the more the pressure, the more there's all these other kind of things that you have to deal with. But having said that, you better know who you are. You better be really strong, because if you fall into the trap, then you'll lose a team, no matter how good you are. And so, this is the part that keeps you on your toes every day. That's what, the higher the level you go, the more that's the challenge every day. And you have to believe in it. I've had some, like anybody, I've had some experiences along the way where I knew that when the management changed, I knew that I was a dead man walking, right? I knew that, you know what, my days here are numbered. And yet, the first time that happened to me, it took like 5-6 months, and I got fired with 2 games left, right? After we had had a good streak. The guy was just looking for a day, right? And somebody said to me, and I said to somebody in the very first meeting that I had with the guy when he came in, we had done some other business. We pulled up chairs like this, and I said to him, okay, where do we start? And he was nervous, and he said to me, I suppose you want to know if you're getting fired. And I said, yeah, that's a good place to start. And he goes, yes. Right? This is 30 seconds into the first meeting, right? And I looked at him and I said, there was a guy who was above him, like with a bigger company. And I said, well, is that his decision or your decision? And he goes, mine. And I said, okay, if that's your answer, but I don't believe it, right? It was a 3-hour meeting, right? And at the end of 3 hours, I said to him, look, so only you know how much of you, I said to him, look, you think you're smart. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm smarter, right? And only you know how much of what you said today was real or not. I said, but how about this? Let me work, okay? Stay out of the way. I'll keep you up on what's going on. And then when you've had enough, let me know, right? And so 6 months later, with 2 games left, he came in and said, okay, we let you go. Yeah. And I said, why now? But the point is this. For those 6 months, I didn't change one bit. I rolled into that training every day. I looked at those players. I said, okay, ready for training. Here's what we are. And when you go through that and it doesn't change you, right, then you say, you know what, I can work anywhere, right? And I think that's true, no matter where you are. So for me, I've been through some situations. When you've been fired a few times, yeah, those are important lessons. But, no matter what the job is, when I was in Egypt, every now and then, I'd have to go into a meeting at the Federation, and my wife would say, will you have a job? And I would say, I'm not sure, but don't worry, because we've done a hell of a job here, and if they decide that they have enough, then we'll be proud and we'll leave. So, again, the only thing that matters, I took the U.S. job, and at first, they made it interim. And Bruce Arena, who's my friend who had been there before me, said, why would you take that job interim? And I said, Bruce, we're all interim, man, all right? The only difference is, at the end of it, if you get fired, it's just the lawyers figuring out how much they owe you, all right? But they can fire us any day, any time, for any reason. That's just the way it works. And if you let all of that influence your work, if you let that change who you are, then the players will see it. You know, I talk about leadership. If you stand in front of the players, if you've lost 5 games in a row and now the press is smacking you, if you stand in front of them and it looks like you're shaking, or it looks like you're nervous, they will spot it in 1 second. So your ability to believe in yourself, look at people, stand up strong, make sure that everybody's in it together. For me, that's what you try to do. So.
Very good, Bob. I just want to end this conversation by saying that the game over here has been very fortunate to have had you around for 2 years. You've been a great inspiration for a lot of people, especially a lot of coaches that seen this man. It's a bit different. He's definitely different to a lot of our own coaches. Whether or not that is good or not, results talks for that. It has to have been very good. It's been good getting to know you, Bob. I want to thank you on behalf of everybody, the way you have been willing to share your knowledge and experience on a number of occasions. It's been great talking to you. I wish you the best of luck in Le Havre, and I hope we can see each other more, and hopefully you'll be back in the game sooner.
Good.
So
just for me, real quick,
yeah.
I've enjoyed being part of the football community in Norway. It's been fantastic. So I'll always feel like I can come back and be part. I'll always watch. But you have a small, committed football community, and for me, it's been an honor to be a part of it with all of you. So,
thank you. Let's give him number 1.
Tusen takk til Teddy Moen. Vær så god fra foreningen.
Takk.
Tusen takk til Mr. Jalland. Bob, you don't always follow the script, but if the script is Bob Bradley, I think you can follow that. Okay?
thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Da får jeg siste ordet for å ta litt praktisk. Jeg håper å se veldig mange av dere på plass opp på pizzaen. Nå går vi